Welcome back to the Betsperts Golf DFS Show here at none other than BetspertsGolf.com. As always, I'm your host, John Daigle, joined today, first up of our trio. You know him as the Model Maniac and the host of the Back Nine Bets podcast. It is none other than Byron Lindeque. Byron, fresh off the Masters, how are you feeling?
Feeling good. I don't have a Masters hangover at all. I'm ready to get back into business here. It was a good week for me on the Rainmaker front, so loving that side of things. RBC, fully loaded field minus Rory and Willie Z. So I'm very excited for the week. It's going to be a great event.
I do wish we would have gotten more than 3.5 rounds of Majors golf, but was also very exciting to see Jon Rahm treat that back nine on Sunday as if it was 75 and sunny out. Just dominated, being Rombo himself. Of course, our third of this trio, you know him as PGA splits himself, none other than the great Ron Klos. Ron, how did you do Masters Week?
Yeah, I came out about even. Losing Zalatoris, like he pulled out, like I had 25%. Rory, as everyone knows, he was one of my big picks. I fell into the trap again. And so those two and Corey Connors, I was also overweight on, but I had a lot of Koepka, and so those guys kind of kept me afloat. But yeah, this week definitely has a different feel to it. We've never really had an event with this strong of a field, which is even stronger than the Masters after a major. So, usually we kind of relax with those Harbour Town beach vibes, but not this week. So back to the grind for everyone.
Let's begin with that because I, as I usually do, popped into the lobby to set some dummies for DFS on Monday, and I'm used to popping into the lobby post-majors and seeing Stewart Cink as the highest roster golfer. When I popped in this week and saw 11K Scotty Scheffler and others, including Rahm, including Sam Burns, including just everyone else who competed at the Masters right there at the top, I was shocked. I thought I jumped into a early majors tournament, but that's not the case at all. The boys are back. Jordan Spieth, who had that massive run on Sunday, included. So I'm very excited to talk about it. And I want to start, Ron, with your preview, which again is free for everyone at the site, course preview, where I start my research every Monday, Tuesday morning on BetspertsGolf.com. And I think 3 interesting notes I took away this week for building lineups was, one, that historically the rough here for the RBC Heritage has been minimally 3.25 or 3/4 inches. That's it. Has not been impact whatsoever. But this year they increased it to 2.5 inches. So it's going to be detrimental, in my opinion, this year around the fairway. Also, as you mentioned, greens here are the second smallest on tour, only 3,700 square feet. So small places to land, even though that does lead to a lot of one putting. And then finally, and I want to get your thoughts after this, Harbour Town, as you noted, has the fewest rate of drives over 300 yards at only 19%. So basically lots of clubbing down, and more importantly, we should be weighing accuracy off the tee more than those who could dominate the course with length. So what are your thoughts around those notions whenever you look at building lineups this week?
Yeah, it's a unique week strategy-wise because off the tee here means almost less than it does on any other course. Distance means literally nothing, thanks to players pretty much having to take less than driver off the tee on a majority of the driving holes. And yeah, like you said, 19% of drives over 300 yards. And so, I think there's only 5 or 6 holes where players are going to consistently take a driver. And so, typically, who are the best players off the tee? Usually it's the elite tier. It's the guys who can bomb it. It's, guys like Rory, who obviously is not here this week, but, Jon Rahm, Scotty Scheffler. And so the fact that players will pretty much all be hitting to the same spots on the fairway with irons the majority of the time. And the fact, if you kind of look at it, it's one of the easiest courses around the greens as well. Now, yes, like you mentioned, the greens are tiny here, second smallest on tour. But around the greens, these complexes, even with the rough growing out a little bit more, it is rye grass. So it's not Bermuda, which is a lot more tricky. So still, I think even with the rough out, I don't think around the greens is going to be that much more difficult. It's pretty easy here. So when you look at those two things, this week kind of turns into an approach plus a putting week. And perhaps the strongest emphasis all year is going to be on approach play this week. And when you look at some of the guys in this field, we'll get to who are just elite with their irons. I think those are the guys that kind of have the best chance to separate themselves from the field this week.
Byron, your thoughts on what people should be looking at when building lineups this week?
Cool. Because, I love having Ron on the show to disagree with him a little bit. But I think a nice way to go about getting a little different as well is if a guy's a really good iron player and has distance. I guess Ron mentioned that a good iron player is what you're looking for, yeah. But if you got significant distance, I think it's so difficult to figure out who does well on these short courses that you have to hit these layups on all the time. But a guy with distance and a good approach play is going to be able to hit that 3-iron 250 yards to where he wants it to be versus someone that's going to hit a 3-wood or a driver that doesn't have that distance. So if you wanting to get a little different about narratives, distance guys might make it out of people's models because they're going to throw in accuracy. That's because of a driver. We figured out that with decade golf and stuff, just pound the driver down there and deal with what comes after that. This golf course is completely different to that. So I think these golfers are going to have driver out their hands, and it will just be one way to make yourself a little different this week.
Well, with that, since Donald, as he mentioned in the chat, took a late lunch just to hear us talk about which players to play, let's go ahead and dive in and start at the top here because, again, a top-heavy field, and let's group them together. And John Rahm, fresh off the Masters, 11-1 at the top on DraftKings. Scotty Scheffler right underneath him, just $100 cheaper at $11K. Then we have Jordan Spieth off that Easter tear at 10-4. Patrick Cantlay, 10-3, who was just bitched about in his final round, walking too slow. And then Colin Morikawa at 10K, who also went on a run before the rain and weather caught up to him. So, Byron, let's start with you. Your thoughts at the top. And initially, I would say, I'm guessing for recency bias, I want to avoid Rahm in DFS. And I don't know what y'all have projected for ownership, but I can see that Scotty Scheffler averaged over 2.5 strokes gained from tee to green last week at the Masters. It's just that was the first time he lost over a stroke in putting since August 14th. So I would say an outlier. Thus, I want to be on Scheffler this week. But your thoughts among that core group of 5-digit players?
I'm in love with Patrick Cantlay this week. This golf course has one of the highest correlations of success, from past events. And Cantlay has the best course history. He's got 4 top 10s in his last 5 appearances. Yeah, one of them last year was a playoff loss to Jordan Spieth, multiple T3s and a T7. So to me, that just screams go to the guy. And if you look at the ball striking for him over the last little while, he's second in the field in ball striking if you take approaching off the tee and add them together. He's incredibly good when the ball's in the air. And then when it just gets to putting, it's a bit of a problem, but he's also putted really well on these greens in the past. So I'm taking a gamble on the putting there, but I love his price. I love the course history. And people might not want to be playing him as much because of the slow stigma. And let them do it. We'll throw him in our lineups.
Ron, your thoughts on these 5 players?
Yeah, so this is interesting because, again, you have Rahm and Scheffler on top. And, again, it just seems like one of the two of them is just coming home with the trophy every week. But, not only do those two have little to no history here at Harbour Town, Scheffler's never even played here, but both, like I said earlier, they're going to be unable to use their massive advantage off the tee to their benefit this week. So when you drop down to Cantlay, and again, I'm in perfect 100% agreement with Byron here, 3 top 7s in his last 4 starts here. Like he said, the ball striking is basically second best in the world, only behind Scotty Scheffler in his last 20 rounds. You combine that with his course knowledge, and, if he can just make the short putts, which he has proven that he's a very good putter. He's just going through a rough spell right now. Again, like Byron said, he's gained 0.4 strokes here in his career on these greens at Harbour Town. So I usually am not confident about an outright selection, but for me this week, I'll never say very confident in golf, as volatile as it can be, but I'm pretty confident he's going to be wearing the tartan plaid jacket on Sunday. So he's my top guy. I'll be very overweight. And yes, you would think maybe some people would be off him, but I've got him at 20% right now. So, whether that means I'm going to be 40%, 50% with him, I'm going to be very heavy. And then just dropping one below, I think we have to talk about Morikawa a little bit because, when we're talking about gaining strokes on approach into tiny greens, and that's, again, going to be one of the main areas that guys are going to be able to separate themselves from the field. So, again, why wouldn't I be overweight on one of the best iron players in the world here? Morikawa also had a pretty interesting quote a couple of years ago when he played here, and he said, it's a course that I think really suits my game. A lot of tee to green, a lot of approach shots that are in my wheelhouse. And so when you look at the improvements he's made with his short game, over the last 3 months, he's gained 0.25 strokes when you combine around the green play and putting. You combine that with how easy these green complexes are all around. I think his game fits this course perhaps better than anyone.
Morikawa also has not lost any strokes on approach dating back to July of last year in any tournament. So clearly the irons are a strength here. My model also suggests Morikawa as a very high option at 10K. Let's move on though to the 9Ks though. And this is where building gets interesting because we are seeing some players coming off terrific performances for recency bias purposes for ownership from the Masters. Victor Hovland, of course, first round leader tie last week at 9-8. Cam Young, 9-6. Tony Finau, 9-4. Schauffele, who we played last week, if only for his approach and low ownership at 9-3. Homa got buried by the weather eventually, but 9-1. So, Byron, let's start in the 9K. Sift through some players here for us.
Yeah, and I won't say, Max shot a 78 in round 4 in ideal conditions, essentially. It was playing tough, but that golf course just does not suit his eye, apparently. So I was bad on going to him. I'll be back on him this week, though. Sorry, Ron. But I love what he can do on all golf courses outside of Augusta. If you take out what he did there, he's just been playing fantastic golf. He's just been stringing fantastic rounds together. I love what he can get up to, especially with the fact that his driver's been the problem lately. I think he's going to be totally fine hitting 3 woods and 3 irons off these tee boxes, getting his irons in play, and the rest of his game will take care of itself there. And then somebody I am all in, and I will be very heavy on him this week, is Cameron Young. I think there's just so much to love. The form coming into this week, the course history here, he's had 1 appearance, T3 last year, got Paul Tesori on the bag, that Webb Simpson's old caddy. He knows this golf course in and out, but he doesn't even have to give him the basics. He can teach him the nuances of this golf course compared to like Augusta last week where he had to give him a crash course. I think this week the training wheels are off. They're going to be strapping rockets to the back of this puppy, and I think it's going to be a fun week to watch Cameron Young dismantle this golf course.
I'll put my foot down, Ron, on Tony Finau before I kick it to you, because for getting steamed for the Masters last week, I do wonder if he somewhat gets overlooked in this field only 1 week later, when really he's been playing amazing. His last 36 rounds, he's 15th among this field in proximity when around the green, which, again, I'm factoring into my model quite heavily since they're such small greens and we're expecting a lot of scrambling from short grass around them. Also, Scheffler and Finau the last 3 months, and this includes a group of Rahm, Morikawa, Scheffler and Finau the last 3 months, the only 2 golfers in this field to average over 1.25 strokes gained on approach. So I think Finau, although he has the long ball in his bag, I think it somewhat fits what he's doing well recently. Your thoughts on the 9Ks, though?
Yeah, so let's talk about Finau here. So for me, and again, I know some people might disagree, but the numbers prove otherwise. He's kind of turning into the turning into the ultimate cash game player. Like when you look at his last 9 events, he's got 9 straight top 26s or better. So he's kind of turning into this ultra consistent guy who, I had an outright on him last week, and he's just kind of always plays well, but he's not getting over the top lately here. So he's going to be someone, and I've said this every week, I'm going to be playing all these guys. Now, some of these guys I'll be underweight on, so Finau will be an example of this. But I'm trying to get pieces of all these guys up top, and again, I'm going to take my stands a little bit lower in the field here. We'll get to some of these guys in the 7 and 8K range, but for me, Victor Hovland is my main guy here in the 9K range. When you look at, again, this course, his ability to put on a ball striking stripe show, 3 straight top 10s, all in either elevated events or majors. So again, we had the Masters last week. So 3 straight top 10s. He's the 5th best player in this field on greens smaller than 5,000 square feet per average. So when you, again, similar to Morikawa, just his ability to kind of just get in on those greens. And there are some tricky pin placements here. And I just think his advantage on those smaller type greens is going to be huge here. And I'll say this about Cameron Young again. He finished 3rd here last year. He'd never seen the course. And I remember everybody was shocked because it seems like this course would not fit his style of play, bomber off the tee. But again, he finds a way to adapt. I don't like his price here. I wish he was a little cheaper, but like Byron said, when you have Tesori on the bag, of course, everybody knows how good Webb Simpson is here. So I think you almost have to play Cam Young as well.
And honestly, I think that assessment of Finau and a top-heavy field is totally fair. If anything, I may need to adjust my analysis because usually we could squeeze these guys low at the RBC. But honestly, if we're paying 9-4, we want win equity. And if he's become what you described as really Finau of old, right, before he won in Hawaii, was the player who had every shot in the bag but just couldn't win because he doesn't have the killer mentality at the end. Like, if he's just become that, honestly, you're right. 9-4 is too expensive for him. So I agree, cash game play. And honestly, maybe that's what Jason Day is becoming too, but we'll get there eventually. Let's move on, though, to the 8s. And Justin Thomas, putter struggled yet again last week, but Justin Thomas, you would think it's a value at 8-9. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, Byron. Sam Burns off a tear at Augusta at 8-7. Sungjae M at 8-6. Tom Kim, I know for a fact, is popping in the models this week at 8-5, and I believe still has very good long shot outright odds at most books. And given his recent play and the way he fits this course, it's probably worth betting on. Matthew Fitzpatrick popped up as an 8% roster player in last week's Millie. He's only 8-4. I think he's a terrific option here. Shane Lowry, win player, which makes sense for this coastal course, at 8-3. Tyrrell Hatton, 8-2. Tommy Fleetwood, 8-1. Sebastian Thigala, 8K. So a handful of players, Byron, you're thinking about in this range.
Yeah. If I'm going to play Max Homer, there's no way I'm playing Justin Thomas. I just can't validate that in my head to drop down $200 more and then get more ownership on a guy that's not nearly as informed. Like, Justin Thomas is going the wrong. He's a fade. If you want, usually ask us, we'll be fading. Justin Thomas is an absolute fade for me. I don't care what his price is. Someone I do not mind as a lower 8K range golfer is Tommy Fleetwood. I think his golf suits this game really nicely. His game suits this course really nicely. Around the greens, Ron said, it's pretty easy to chip and stuff around here. He's the best baseline around the green play in my model. And he's going to be making birdies and stuff from around the greens versus just guys getting up and down. So he's lethal around the greens. Like you mentioned, Tom Kim, for once, off the tee accuracy is going to actually work in his favor because he's going to be able to hit those 3-woods drivers when everyone else is hitting 3-woods 3-irons and not be punished for it because the distance is going to be to the same endpoint. And then those irons are going to come firing in. So I don't mind Tom Kim here. And then a little bit of a chalky play is going to be Sungjae Im, but he's basically the poor man's Tony Finau essentially as well. I'd say he's just got that consistency, no real upside to win, but he's going to be making cuts for you quite regularly. And I love his, top 20 rate. So love Sungjae.
Ron, you mentioned wanting to perhaps skip past 9K, hammer and flag plant a few guys in the 8 and 7K. So go ahead and get started in this range.
Yeah, so we often talk about, kind of one of the strategies in DFS is playing a stars and scrubs approach. I think in this 8K range, it's almost like you can play a stars and stars approach. And now I'll talk about Justin Thomas here. So, I completely understand what Byron's saying. And yes, his ownership is creeping higher and higher. I have him right around 16% right now, which is a little shocking to me considering his recent play. So again, I'm not going to be overweight on him or anything, but I just think, a player of that level, if you're just trying to, squeeze another guy in here with win equity, which again, let's admit it, he still does have a lot of win equity here. Well rested, motivated, coming off those bad performances at the Masters. He does thrive on these less than driver type courses. Again, when we're talking about Harbour Town is probably, even Jordan Spieth said this a bunch of times yesterday at his press conference, but when you're talking about having a shot shape around the trees, the dog legs, Harbour Town is the ultimate shot shaping course. But we all know Justin Thomas, perhaps the best one, at kind of creatively hitting his irons in different spots. So when you throw in some wind, which we do have a wind in the forecast a couple days here, best player around the green. So I think this does fit his game well. I think he finished, I can't remember, but I think 8th in 2020. That was the second tournament after the COVID break. And so has experience here. So again, it's kind of a decision everybody has to make on JT this week. I will be playing him. Yeah, I completely agree with what Byron said. Sungjae brings all the course history here. And another thing I noticed doing some research, last two events, Sungjae has gained a combined 12 strokes ball striking at two of the toughest ball striking courses in the world, Augusta National, TBC Sawgrass. So his iron play, his off the tee play is on point here. He's actually finished outside of the top 40. Now, if we're talking about Tony Finau, how consistent he is, Sungjae has only finished 3 times outside of the top 40 in the last 9 months. So another just ultra consistent guy. I do love Fitzpatrick this week. You know, at 8,400, his ownership is not really that high. I'm seeing about 10, 11%. And, you know, of course, he's had the injury concerns with the back. Recent results, I think if you look, kind of indicate a return to form. You know, he gained over 4 strokes on approach at the Masters, and that's all I needed to see. Once I see his approach game is back, you know, he has 3 top 14s here. So he has said in the past this is one of his favorite courses. And I'll drop down to Tyrrell Hatton really quick. He's my last guy here at 8,200. 34th at the Masters. He did play well for long stretches, and the Masters, Augusta National, kind of has always been a mental block for him. He flat out said he hates the course. Played decent there for the first time. He's gained here on approach in all 3 of his starts at Harbour Town. He was 3rd here in 2020. Kind of the biggest surprise in my model that I create every week, he finished 9th overall. And again, he's a guy who kind of known as one of the best long iron players in the world. And again, so off the tee, he's going to be able to hit those 3 irons, 4 irons. And so I think Tyrrell Hatton is a really good quality play here at 8,200.
Anyone, Ron, before we move on to the 7Ks, that you were seeing early on Wednesday that may be rostered highly in tournaments, especially the smaller, like Millie Maker tournaments, that you are fading this week? Because I don't think, for instance, Justin Thomas will be too high rostered. Like, I think you actually get him relatively lower than what he should be.
Yeah, I think JT is going to be higher rostered in the lower dollar amounts. I think the sharps are going to be maybe off him a little bit more just because of that ownership. So I think you kind of have to play that angle depending on what contest you're entering. I think Tom Kim is a guy who, as much as I like him and as much as he does fit this course, you know, I'm seeing him at about 15% right now. Again, he was solid at the Masters, but kind of in the weeks prior to that, he's kind of had his struggles recently, as most kind of rookie players do. So, you know, in this strong field, now if this was a normal RBC Heritage with, you know, kind of weaker to average field, I would be all over him. But I just think in this field with all these elite players, he would probably be the one guy, in my opinion, that I'm going to be less weight on.
Byron, any thoughts on that range? A player you don't mind fading? Maybe it's Justin Thomas.
Yeah. Well, Ron's internet was getting really bad when you're speaking about JT. So I'm assuming even the internet doesn't want Ron to suggest that, but we'll just leave it at that. You know, I don't think he's had 2 top 20s in the last 8 starts for Justin Thomas. Right. And it's just, one of them was barely a top 20. So it's just like disappointing golf from him all around. If I'm going with that ownership, you got to give me something solid, man. And he's just not showing me that.
Well, let's sneak down a little bit because I think we're going to see some players steamed here because now we're getting interesting between Keegan Bradley at 7.9, Corey Connors, a popular play who missed the cut last week at 7.8, Russell Henley, a popular play at 7.8. I would imagine again this week, Matt Kuchar at 7.7, who I really think has outright winning odds here in this tournament. Justin Rose at 7.7. And then, of course, Ricky Fowler, who was playing amazing heading into the Masters, but had to win the Valero, which he did not, to make Augusta at 7.6. So let's go ahead and Siwoo Kim at 7.6 as well. So let's go ahead and cut it off there for right now. And Byron, let's start with you. A couple players you're higher on here. And I think we're getting into the part of the conversation where we begin asking, at what point do you want to stop dipping down? Because in a top-heavy field, you don't think these guys have T10, T15 equity. I don't think we're there yet with a couple players I just mentioned, but yes, I think we're getting into that territory now.
Yeah. And, you know, just the lineups I've been building, I've noticed that it's very easy to throw a lineup together without even going into the 6K this week. And I think if you want to be different, you can, if you find a guy that maybe like $6,100 and take an absolute chance on him, and then you can load up, with some really good guys up top. So just a little lineup strategy. I don't know if that makes even sense, but throwing that out there, you can call me out if I'm talking nonsense. But Keegan Bradley's someone who's not going to be particularly that high owned. I like Corey Connors, Matt Kuchar. Those are going to be a little bit more popular plays. Matt Kuchar, man, I love me some Matt Kuchar, and you play Matt Kuchar at golf courses. Matt Kuchar plays well at. He plays well at Harbour Town. Love what he can get up to. Ricky Fowler is one of the best iron players from 150 to 200. You're going to see about 46% of shots come from that proximity this week. And to be one of the best in that range is going to be very critical. I love what he can get up to. And then JT Poston. So he has gained in every category over the last 4 times he's played at Harbour Town, except for approach. So off the tee, putting, and around the greens, he's gained strokes in every single event, except for approach, 2 years. This year, he comes into Harbour Town with approach being his best stat of the last 24 rounds. So if the stars align, JT Poston with a course history of phenomenal caliber, I think he's had also 3 top 10s in his last 4 starts. Sign me up for a guy that's ball striking the crap out of it right now, who's loves putting and chipping around these greens.
Ron, let's kick it to you and go ahead and dip into the low 7Ks also. I do think what's interesting about this range is Corey Connors and Tom Hoge, 2 players we wanted for the Masters and just happened to miss the cut, which reminds me of why we played and talked about him, Ryan Fox, last week, because he was coming off a missed cut at Valero despite being in terrific recent form. So I do think we're going to get those 2 players in particular, Connors and Hoge, at lower ownership than what they should be given their recent performance based off one tournament. So your thoughts on flag plants in the 7K.
This range is just full of guys who you have different skill sets who kind of fit this course in different ways. I mean, yeah, I'll go through these really quick, but Corey Connors, I think this is a great bounce back spot. We burned a lot of people last week. When you look at his last 3 trips here, 21st, 4th, 12th. So again, course week, one of the best balls in the world. Russell Henley, confidence going to be extremely high. Okay, 4th place at the Masters, elite ball striker. He kind of plays his best at these shorter wedge fest type courses, similar to kind of the success he's had at courses like Waialae, Sedgefield. Again, 3 missed cuts, but he was also 9th here in 2021. So going down to perhaps my favorite play here, Siwoo Kim. Everybody knows he's a P-dye specialist. He loves these short positional courses. Lost in a playoff here in 2018, but he's one of the best, 5th best in the field from 125 to 200 yards. Of course, he won Sony this year at the Concourse Waialae, played really well. Sedgefield, he's won, Sawgrass. So, again, just another guy who really fits this course. Chris Kirk, 7,500, another guy who's just ultra consistent, solid at the Masters. He's been playing really well recently, of course, winning at the Honda. Going down, like you said, we talk about this every week, Tom Hoge. Some weeks he burns us, some weeks he finishes 3rd like he did at the Players. Again, still the best iron player in the world at a course that demands that kind of play. And so even at the Masters, he was positive on approach, even though he missed a cut. Again, his short game continues to give him trouble. But again, this week, short game, those weaknesses are kind of be mitigated here. Continues to shine on shorter courses. Like we said, 3rd at the Players, 1 Pebble Beach. And then going down a little bit lower here, I've got 2 more guys. So Adam Hadwin, another less than driver course standout. He's got 2 top 15s in elevated events already this year, including at the Players, another Pete Dye track. And then here's a guy most people, I don't even think anybody's playing him anymore. Can you guess who that is in the low 7K range, who typically is a very good player, but anybody?
Thomas Dietrich.
7,300. He's only 3% owned right now. Has been awful.
Straka has a win here recently as well. I was going to guess.
No, come on.
Okay.
Come on, Daigle. He's one of your guys.
One of
Brian
my
Harmon.
guys.
Okay, Brian Harmon.
Give me a reason to get back on, because I got burned hard last week.
Okay.
Hard.
So here's one of the things 2 things I'm grasping onto here. Okay, so first of all, he can't keep going this bad forever. He typically rises to the occasion in these bigger events. Okay. Well, here's the second one. So I did a little research on performance the week after a major. Okay, and he over the last 5 years, actually 8 years, going back to 2015, he has gained the most strokes out of anybody in this field playing the week after a major. He's got 5 top 10s. He's averaging a 1 point gain per round in all these events that he's played. So again, 7,300. Not saying you should play him 15, 20% or anything, but he's coming in at 2-3%. So I'm going to have him maybe around 8-9%, kind of triple the field. And again, to me, this course fits him. Shorter course, taking less than driver off the tee. So I'm going to roll with Harmon here, and I think he could be a great play. Could be in the winning lineup. Never know.
For the record, there is a video on YouTube out there last week that offers proof that I spent $40 real on a Brian Harmon Rainmaker's rare card and then immediately got over 8 strokes on him in the first 2 rounds. So not great, but I'm always willing to listen to some Brian Harmon love here. Now is when we slip in, though, to the 7Ks or 6Ks, Byron. And again, we talked about it. T15, T20 equity from this range. Can we really get it in a field that includes Morikawa, Spieth, Rahm, Scheffler, the list goes on and on. So your thoughts on this range overall, and is there anyone that stands out?
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, I never really dipped into the 7s. So Kurt Kitayama, Sam Ryder, Adam Svensson, some nice guys there I like in the low 7s. Brendan Todd and Nick Taylor are 2 guys that I do think have top 20 equity. They suit this golf course really nicely from Todd's little dink and dunk mentality, and Nick Taylor's just super well-rounded golfer. I love what he can get up to. Tyler Duncan, also on a coastal golf course, is someone that intrigues me. Scooting down the board all the way down to the bottom, is if you want to take a shot at Stuart Sink at $6,500, he's a past winner here before. I think he thrives on these kind of golf courses. I'm not entirely sure why, but he plays nicely at these venues. And then it's tough. I mean, $6,100, I might take a stab at Ryan Moore, who's just really, really, really consistent on these shorter golf courses too. And if you really want to get frisky at $6,100, Ernie Els. Okay. I know he's from the Champions Tour.
Frisky.
That is very frisky. But if you think about it, Ernie's out there contending with the champion boys. And what is the thing with the champions? They don't hit it very far, right? I think Ernie's probably played around Harbour Town a few times in his life, and he's phenomenally good at golf. So at $6,100, I trust him more than Jim Herman, if I'm putting it that way, right? So it's not necessarily the comparison you want to make, but if you're looking for an absolute salary saver, I'm going to take a shot at Ernie. Also he's a South African guy, which I named my dog after him too. So lots to like about Ernie, but that's dire situations.
That is relative to my Kyle Stanley makes the cut at Stoneman 6K call 2 weeks ago. So good luck to you with Ernie Els. Ron, your thoughts on 6K, because I genuinely, in a handful, if not a majority of my lineups, don't think I'll be dipping to this range. I don't think I need to, given my love with so many players we discussed in the 7Ks.
Yeah, like Byron, I'm just going to touch on a couple in the low 7K range really quick here. And again, if you're going to play a kind of a South African homer pick, Christian Bezuidenhout should be your play, not Ernie Els at 7,100. So anyways, moving past that, Cam Davis is another guy here who, again, people are frustrated with him. He's the ultimate boom bust play. He's missed 6 of his last 7 cuts. But again, he is kind of got this reputation for being really good on these shorter, less than driver courses. He finished 6th at the Players just 2 starts ago. He's finished 3rd here last year, 25th the year before. His ball striking has been fine. It's just been his short game that has just left him for some reason. So again, with around the green kind of play mitigated here, it's not as challenging. I think he's definitely worth a shot at 5% ownership right now. But yeah, going down to this 6K range, and like you said, John, I'm not going low here. In fact, my lowest guy I think might be 6,800. So I love Brendan Todd. I do agree with Byron on him. Again, with off the tee not really mattering here. He's kind of irons, wedges, putting. When you combine those 3 together, he's top 15 in this field over his last 50 rounds. He finished 20th overall in my model this week. And so not typical you see a 6K guy finish that high. for me. And again, I think a lot of people are also forgetting about Ben Griffin. His approach play has been bad lately. But again, sitting here at 6,900, he's proven he can play with the big boys. He's played in a bunch of elevated events already, finished 6 top 25s this year. He's only missed the cut in 3 of his 17 starts. And so I think Ben Griffin's a sneaky kind of a play if you're looking to fit one guy who just, hey, let's get through the cut, see what he can do on the weekend. I think he fits perfectly. I think JJ Spawn is another guy who's just ultra accurate off the tee when you get to these tight fairways. He's gained over 8 strokes on approach in his last 2 events. He won his match play group, 22nd at the Valero. So I think he's another guy that might fly under the radar here a little bit. And finally, I will leave with one of my favorites, and I think it may be tough for him in this type of elevated field, but Akshay Bhatia, 6,800. Again, similar to Cameron Davis, just kind of, very high ceiling, very low floor. But I think with his approach play, shorter course, coastal, he loves these coastal courses, especially when wind is involved. I think you could do a lot worse than Bhatia at 6,800.
Lots of plays we discussed throughout the show, but I think ultimately lineups will end up on at least one 5-digit player and then probably a handful of 7K options, given that, again, we've talked about a lot who have terrific outright odds, even at that price, and are undervalued. So I want to ask Byron, your 2 favorite golfers, one being 5-digit player and the other being a 7K player.
I'll start off with my 7K guy that I don't even think I mentioned. Taylor Montgomery is somebody that can score to wazoo DFS points. And he's typically a very popular play, but at $7,500, I don't mind him at all. And then I'll go with Cantley as my 10K guy. I really just, that course history, man, that is some of the most beautiful stuff to look at. So it's obviously going to end with him missing the cut, but I just can't pass that up right now.
Ron, I love Hoagie and Connors for sure for ownership. I'll definitely have a lot of them sprinkled in, and this may even be the chalk. I'm still building and have to this point through Wednesday, a lot of my core around Scheffler and either Henley or Kuchar combos. What about you with a high player and a low 7K player?
So again, I completely agree with Byron. Cantley is my guy. So instead of taking him, instead of repeating what he said, I'm going to go Matty Fitz at 8,400. Sure. I might have just as much of him as Cantley. I just think with his low ownership he's coming in with, his health, his approach game, hopefully back to what it was before. But for me in the 7K range, it's going to be Siwoo Kim. I just think he's been so consistent over the past year. He kind of had this reputation before as being a guy who, when is he going to withdraw? He's going to miss the cut by 10 strokes. That doesn't happen anymore. He's become this very, just every week in and week out. And so I think he is kind of a perfect course for him to kind of pop and maybe finish top 10. Who knows? Maybe even win the whole thing. So Siwoo Kim is my guy.
And finally, Byron, usually gives the people some bets to end with here. So your favorite bet doesn't have to be outright, but your favorite bet for the week.
So speaking of Tony Finau earlier, top 20 plus 145 on FanDuel. Sure. So to me, him and Xander are both perfect examples of a top 20 bet this week.
Ron?
So I like Brendan Todd is going right now at plus 190 for a top 40 on DraftKings. So I think that's tremendous value. Just this, again, like we said earlier, it's just kind of course. So that's my best bet.
And remember, you can get terrific odds on just parlaying 2 players. That's all you need. Just parlay 2 players like a Ben Griffin T40 and Tony Finau T20 at FanDuel for over plus 200. So I think that's a good lean given y'all's 2 bets. Ron, what can everyone else find at the site, betspertsgolf.com right now?
Yeah, so another reminder, we have our our new custom stats database. It's based off of officially licensed PGA Tour data that we are continuing to work on, improve. Again, you can create your own model. We have at least 25 stats that no other site out there has that you can kind of use in building your model. So we're going to continue to add to that as we go here. So keep checking that. And then, of course, I'll have some first-round leader stuff out on the member Discord tonight. We keep adding to that Discord Also at 4:30 Eastern time, we are going live on the Discord. Me and Ryan Noonan and Andy. We're going to be going through any questions people have, DFS plays, late bets people start thinking about making, injury concerns, weather. So we'll be discussing all that on our member Discord at 4:30.
Byron, what else can people find from you for RBC content?
RBC content at the Model Maniac on Twitter is the hub for all my stuff. It's Rotoballer, it's Back 9 Bets, it's the whole shebang over there at the Model Maniac. So that's it.
And Rainmakers content from me on the site. Quick video, the top 3 buy low cards I think you can get right now in the field, looking ahead at future tournaments. And at least the first 2, some high-priced players will shock you because I think they can be bought for cheaper than what we're expecting in the next couple of weeks. We'll be back next week with more content. Thank you, Donald, for taking an early lunch. We will see you next week. And remember, be a little bit kinder than what's required. See you then.